Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. Psst, Jill killed Jack. I very much need some socks, pretty please, with sugar on top. This was the text that I sent to my estranged ex-wife, the one who wanted to drag me out to the wilderness under the guise of talking about financing our first child's entrance into college. I knew that she was old-fashioned and wanted to push me from a hill, just like Fellini. So my last request was not very sinister. I mean, even death row inmates should get some free laundry or a meal, maybe even a prayer. I looked into the pantry of my rental and decided there was no good food. Bachelor food is disgusting when you leave it in the fridge for a week. I needed my dog. Hey, can we bring the dog? I knew that Caspian hated hiking just as much as me. It was like walking without purpose, like smelling flowers just to get allergies. I also knew that if Michelle threw me over a cliff and I was able to not immediately die, then Caspian the burner could theoretically pull me up with a rope. I decided to wear my flax Bermuda-styled shorts, which can be unwoven and turned into rope or a joint. She did not immediately text back and scold me for overpacking. This was a good sign because I had previously said I would find some kind of therapy. She wanted a stranger to break my will, make me cry, pay for the breaking, and send me back all trained. Also, I had a very large life insurance policy at the time. Husband therapy is kind of like dog training, but the wife forgets that she has to remember the commands, or the husband will forget, and the 2 weeks and $1,500 in Idaho won't take. She has to reinforce the electric shock therapy, the way the husband therapist swings a hand like windshield wipers and asks if my mother ever touched me inappropriately. It was just 38 minutes before the murder. Hike. In Knights of Calabria, Fellini taught us that a kind whore will get many marriage proposals, walk up to the mountain of love with all her savings, and get thrown over the mountain by her fake fiancé. I decided to pack like Fellini. I went up to my rented room and looked for all the things that could be lugged in a hefty garbage bag suitcase. There was the square bottle with a ship that my grandfather had constructed with tweezers. Nah, he's dead. There were piles of clothes on the ground. These kept me from bringing a drunk woman home. No one wants to make love next to dirty laundry. That's pretty gross if they do. I saw pictures of my kids when they were young and realized they were getting old, going to college, all taking medications to avoid giving me grandkids. I looked at the pillows. They were stiff, so I used them only to prop up a cell phone to watch Italian movies. It was better to pillow on a wad of sweaters and save the neck. I went into the closet and found my mafia money. It was just an envelope from the bank full of cash because I hate wasteful tipping. For some reason, the kids at the register have a very difficult time begging for tips of cash when they only punched in buttons. They do not have this problems with cards because they say, "Please follow the instructions on the screen," when they ask for 30%, 40%. One of the cashiers actually said my card was declined because he hit the 50% tip option for me. I use cash so the kids can beg like adults. There is no need for great cash when your former estranged spouse wants to go hiking in the wilderness. Also, I think she is bitter because of the dating. She pretends she doesn't mind that much, but always gets me drunk and asks for details. I don't know what I tell her half the time. I see a bottle of Canadian Mist. whiskey that was purchased for toothaches and bladder infections. It is not a very good bottle of whiskey, but it is lightweight since half of it is missing. It is best to be slightly inebriated before being thrown off a cliff. Also, the fall hurts less. I packed the whiskey. Now my closet is executive clean. I have 10 handkerchiefs laid out in case one of the kids gets married. Handkerchiefs are the required minimum for a gentleman of the ages. You can offer the spare to a woman in tears. You can use the linen to avoid touching bathroom knobs. It makes a wonderful mask in the case of desperate last-minute need for larceny. I love handkerchiefs. I packed 10 in the garbage bag, knowing that large puncture wounds should be full of gauze. For this reason, I had to return the silk hankies. It is better for the absorbent cotton in case of a fall. What else? It was a tiny room with windows facing the main road in town. The firemen and police went up and down the road trying to find an entrance to Starbucks. They put in a one-way driveway to be tricky. I had some bills on my desk, but I didn't want to bring these to the afterlife. I decided to quickly pay for my parking bill because I didn't want my extra truck to get towed if I should be in the community hospital for very long. I said a small, "Thank you, God," because 2 of our 3 nurses had wanted to date, but you should never date medical people in a small town. Amputations happen when you are not a gentleman. What else? Sheets? Number comforter for comfort? Number Michelle had felt bad that I was cold without her cuddles and bought a comforter matching certain parts of her body. Peach. It was definitely a distraction if ever a gentleman has lady company. A man should have his bed colored in very serious colors, perhaps gray and black, and I needed a multi-tool. A multi-tool is the American version of a Swiss Army knife. It is neither a knife nor from the Swiss. Our multi-tools should be from Leatherman because they have pliers and blades, which do not fold back on fingers. They have finger locks. Unfortunately, I had the Lowe's knockoff multi-tool, which had already severed half of a finger. A nurse, who I did not date, stitched it back on with some weird thread that was supposed to dissolve. She kept sticking that fishhook needle and whispering, "Does it hurt? Does that hurt? What if I do this?" I didn't go back to remove the stitches, which didn't shrink or get dissolved. The nerve was actually clipped by the fake multi-tool, and I can feel the rain coming 5 days before the weatherman now. I put the multi-tool in the garbage bag with the whiskey and the handkerchiefs. 22 minutes. Now, in the smallest case that Michelle actually wanted to talk about paying for our kids' college and not throw me over the cliff, I was prepared to bring a checkbook. I would argue that the check should be endorsed to the child herself. Michelle would argue that kids might spend all the money drinking and whoring like their father. I resented that comment because our town didn't actually have any real prostitutes. In order to avoid the impasse of how the child will spend the money for education, Michelle would push me over the cliff, wait 6 weeks, and get my life insurance. She didn't like long and sustained arguments because she was taking yoga. I decided to bring my checkbook and not transfer any money into the account. What would they say? "We're sorry. He has the money in a money market, but we cannot legally transfer this money to you. Is he around?" Then she would feel really silly about kicking the goose over the glade. It is important for husbands and fathers to always be useful. Do not teach them how to start a BBQ grill. They will inevitably become vegans and hire a gardener. They will keep the seat down and the toothpaste caps fully engaged. The planned obsolescence of a man starts with money. Try to get your spouse fired. In my case, this was not possible. She worked for the state. So after so many decades, the man is not necessary. He must be thrown from the hill under the guise of good health. His dog may or may not follow, depending if the man fed the dog in the last few months. Dogs are ultimately loyal to the person who puts kibble in the bowl. It is nothing personal. 16 minutes till death. The waning sun reminded me, you could throw her down the hill. Wow, I never considered murder for life, insurance, or love. I never considered her last words. Would she fall down the hill and say, I was just kid, ding? Wow, this was huge. It didn't seem very noble to throw a former wife down a hill. I don't know what was going on with Jack and Jill, but I bet it wasn't his idea to get any water. Notice that Jack broke his crown, head, long before Jill slipped on the murder weapon. Moral: do not go up hills for water. Water likes to be lower due to gravity. I knew that a former spouse did not really care about my good health, never dying due to exercise, but I also felt she would bring me some socks out of duty. She is prideful like that. She wants her man to die with clean socks because a coroner will look for the meaning of death and should not be confused by bad odors, nor have to cut the socks off the body. They get stiff with grime. Also, 11 minutes. I really wanted to get some veneers before death. It seems really creepy to have a perfect white smile in death but hide the blemishes with a beard in life. The coffee struggle had taken its toll. I have never heard of anyone suing Starbucks for their loss of white. How would you even quantify the loss? You Honor, I was going to get a new hot wife, but I couldn't smile due to Starbucks stains. How much did that cost you, Mr. Go-Round? The lady from San Jose had stock options of Oracle. She's probably a billionaire. I lost this opportunity because of Starbucks stains. I would never smile. Can you show me your receipts? No, Honor. I paid in cash to avoid needless tipping. How do we know you didn't stain your teeth from Pete's coffee? Pete's roast gives me heartburn. Can you prove this heartburn? Ouch. It was going to be just like the cigarette debacle. If you smoke one Marlboro in your life, you cannot blame Camels for your cancer. Tobacco manufacturers know this and promote community smoking to destroy the single source theory. 7 minutes. In my last 7 minutes of life, before Michelle brought the dog in the Prius, before the socks were delivered, and she had a large aluminum canister of water filled with melatonin to knock me out at the summit. She knows I get sleepy near the summit. Contrary to popular notions, St. Bernards and their cousin dog, the Bernese mountain dog, do not actually have smelling salts in their saliva glands. They cannot lick you to consciousness. They usually have less than a tankard of whiskey around their neck, because the whiskey is meant to fortify the dog in bad weather. Some share, that is true. But mostly the large dog will watch you falling into snoring, as the Michelle commands that he uses his large head to push his former master over the hill. The dog will think it is just a game since his eyes are poor on telescopic visions. He cannot tell if the cliff is a few feet or a few leagues. He will actually get excited to be playing a lazy game where he doesn't have to fetch and get sweaty. My poor dumb dog will be an accomplice to murder. No, if not for my own sake, I must think of California law, how they will eventually kill Caspian because he was a man killer. The law does not care if it was his idea or the woman. He will be taken to the Black Ops section of the SPCA and ethically sent to heaven. They are very moral about these things, and overcrowding is at an all-time high. Please remember to spray and neuter your pet to avoid euthanasia. My body? I need something reflective for the Air Force. She will probably bring me to Fort Ord to hike. They are an inactive Army base. This is why we need the Air Force to gather my remains. 1 minute. What the hell can they see from outer space? I decided to wrap myself in Mylar. I would go out looking like a Chinese spy balloon. someone would find this story and know it wasn't the dog's fault after all. I will try to come back to edit this. She just arrived with a Prius. The dog looks hungry, in too deep. Sean sat alone in a dark confession booth, fighting back his tears. The mesh slat to his right took the shape of the crucifix. A door clicked open, and light shone through the slat, before vanishing as the door shut. I wondered if I would see you again, said the priest, sitting beyond the divider to Sean's right. The devil sat on his left. Read it to me one more time, Father, Sean said. The voice that spoke through the crucifix was soft. I would be more help if you just told me. Please, Father, don't. Just read me the passage. There was a slight shuffle of papers, and the priest began. Forthwith Judas came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. Then they came, laid hands upon Jesus, and took him. Without a word, Sean left. Moonlight spilled across the Liffey while the sound of beer bottles clattering carried from the other side of the river. Sean meandered with his hands stuffed in his coat pockets, while his breath fogged in the cold air. A set of headlights crept from behind, casting his shadow lankly across the cobblestone. Finn, called a hushed voice from behind. Finn, where the heck have you been? I've been looking all over for you. Sean tensed, not wanting that name to follow him, not tonight. He turned and held up a gloved hand, blocking the car's light. All he could see was the shadow hanging out of the driver's window, but he recognized the voice. It was his handler. Christy? Feck's sakes. Christy stepped out of the car and closed the door, the sound loud in the quiet street. He paced over to Sean and they walked together. Sean sighed. I'm sorry I had to. See the fecking priest again? Christy touched Sean's shoulder and continued. Finn, it'll be all right, lad. We're almost there. 5 years of hard work and it's all about to pay off. He released a large breath. The vapor rose and faded. Feels longer. Aye. Sean knew the question was coming and wondered whether Christy genuinely cared about his visit to the priest, or if he was simply trying to maintain a sense of familiarity. 5 years, and Christy was the only one from the outside Sean was allowed to contact. He'd requested a therapist, and Christy had come back a month later with the response, Can't, lad. Too risky. Anything you need to get off your chest, you tell me. How could he tell Christy he wanted out of the gig? After 5 years of being deep undercover within the largest criminal gang in Ireland, how could he share his doubts now? So, began Christy. The question, the reason he was here, incoming, have they told you who you're going to whack? Sean walked over to the river's railing and placed his hands upon it. Kneel, he muttered. What? No, he said. Don't be so hard on yourself. The guard's never going to let one of their own commit murder, not even to off some degenerate. Sean nodded. As soon as you know anything, and I mean anything, location, victim, accomplices, you let me know and I'll pass it on. Conspiracy to commit murder. That's all we need. Besides, I shan't be hard to find. I'm stuck chauffeuring around the old Bell and Michel. God knows I want to put that cranky so-and-so in cuffs myself. All right? Sean nodded again. The truth lay on his tongue, involved in a bitter feud with a lie. Christy, he said as his handler headed back to the car. Christy turned, the headlights again shining and making him appear like an obscure shadow. You right? Sean opted for the truth. Tomorrow. The hits tomorrow. The next day, Sean met Liam, Michial's son and Sean's unwitting informant, at the Gaelic Warrior Boxing Club. The 6 a.m. session stunk to high heaven with sweat, while the sound of dozens of gloves smacking pads filled the large shed. Sean climbed the steps onto the main ring where Liam watched Patrick, the bullman Doherty, a young gun who eyed the world title. "Finn," said Liam, "what's the crack?" They clapped hands and embraced. The first thing Sean wanted to do was to ask about the hit, but he was well practiced in pretending to be someone he wasn't, so he kept his conversation cordial, waiting for Liam to bring it up. "How's he going?" Sean asked, gesturing at the bullman, who was busting a sharp combo on his trainer's pads. Liam tilted his head, a habit usually reserved for discussing drug trafficking, and muttered, "He's got talent, but he's a bit of a hothead. I should get him in with you, teach him how to stay calm." "Calm?" Sean laughed. "I don't remember being calm. I just remember being belted." "Nonsense," said Liam. "I didn't take you on 'cause you can scrap. I manage hundreds of boxers. They can all do that. You can handle pressure, Finn. That's why we chose you for today." Sean's insides tensed, but his eyes remained unflinching. Nothing I ain't done before. Sean hadn't told Christy the entire truth last night. He had told him the hit was going to be today, which it was. He also said he didn't know who they were taking out or where, and that was the truth. But he had said Liam wouldn't be there, and that was bollocks. "Well, you ain't done none like this," said Liam. "It's a Garda, a dirty coppa." Sean looked towards the boxing class taking place on the floor, hiding his reaction from Liam. Cold air swept over his skin. His shoulders shuddered, and his mind flashed to images from 4 years ago. He was 27, and the bright lights dazzled overhead. The coach was there, but he hardly remembered him. He remembered Michial and Liam in his corner. His opponent was some hard-bred scouser, as bald as a hard-boiled egg, with a mashed nose and a bitter scowl. The scouser eyeballed Sean, and Sean was shit-scared. "Don't worry about that prick," Liam had said. "He don't look tough. It's some inbred deformity." Sean turned and leant over the corner ring. Michial rubbed his shoulders, speaking sternly. "Come out with 3 fast jabs. Bam, bam, bam. He'll slip the last one, then pow right hook. You tracking?" Sean nodded and spat out agreement over his mouthguard. "All right," said Liam. "Give him hell." The bell dinged. It had been a tough fight, one that went the distance, and when it was all over, the name Finn was called out. He'd won, and the rest of the night was a blur down at Temple Bar. But before the first pint was raised, Sean had been overcome with a feeling, a deep relaxation that settled itself across every inch of his skin. A feeling that told him he didn't have to watch over his shoulder anymore. A feeling that said, "Relax. They trust you. And you trust them. You trust me, don't you, Finn?" Liam patted his shoulder. Sean swallowed and turned back to face him. "Of course I do," he said, his heart burning. That same flame that used to cinder at almost every conversation in his first year while he wormed his way in. Now they had discovered he was undercover, that he was a rat, and they were going to off him. "Good," Liam said. "Trust is important." A car pulled up in the drive, visible beyond the shed's rolled-up door. Christy stepped out of the front, shot Sean a troubled glance, and opened the back door. Michael, the old-school hardman and head of the largest drug trafficking cartel in all of Europe, stepped out. Michial, gray-haired with a stalwart face, raised his hand and beckoned the 2 men. "Come on, lads. Christy's driving." In the back seat, Sean kept his arms folded, squeezing his rib cage as it rose and fell with measured breaths. Liam was on his left, silent and staring out the window as the streets of Dublin flitted by. "I've been in this game for over 30 years," said Mitchell from the front seat. "And I'll tell you one thing, I've learned a lot. Firstly, if it falls into your lap, then it's too good to be true. Left here," he said to Christy. Christy flicked the indicator. "If you tell me the location, I can just punch it into maps." "No," said Michial. "Where we're going, I don't want the phone to remember." Christy's eyes burrowed into Sean through the rear-view mirror. Michial's gnarled finger appeared in the space between the two front seats, and he continued. "Second thing relates to the first. Be careful who you let in. The people you shouldn't trust, the ones who are out to get you, they make it easy. Make your life seem easy, I mean. Anything worthwhile is earned through hard work. Same goes for loyalty. The same thing I'm telling you, Finn. I've been telling Liam all my life. If it comes easy, it's cheap." Apart from the occasional direction from Michial, the rest of the drive was silent, although Sean was in constant communication to the Lord. "God Almighty, I ask for your courage as I venture once more into the crossroads. I'm torn between lives and ashamed to admit I have worn a mask for so long that I have forgotten my own face. I used to honor this job, finding those who lived between the cracks of a broken system, but I find myself slipping deeper into the same space with each passing hour. I am in too deep, and I fear the greater sin, to break my oath to the Garda Síochána, or to turn my back on what has become my family. I'm to blame, Father. I sowed the seeds of betrayal, and now I reap the bitter harvest. As Dublin has witnessed my struggle, may the heavens hear my plea. Pull me from this labyrinth, Lord, once and for all. Amen." Christy pulled up at Ballymun, just north of the M50. Their destination was a large pasture that stretched between Dublin Airport and a litter-filled caravan park. "We're walking," said Michial. The clouds above were a lamb of gray, and although the grass was short, the men seemed to trudge. They were heading in the direction of the airport, by the pasture's boundary, where a snarl of bushes clambered along a chain-link fence. A shovel stood pressed into a mound of dirt, and beneath that opened a wide and deep hole. "You really think we trusted you, you fucking rat?" said Michial, turning around with a black pistol in his hand. Sean closed his eyes, trying to dampen his blazing heart. His lungs pulled in a thick breath of air, which only fed the fire more oxygen. He wanted to cry like he almost did in the confession booth, and figured he very well might. Why not? Sean opened his eyes and saw the pistol aimed straight at Christy. "He's an undercover," said Michial. "Been pretending to be my driver, all the while sniffing around my backside." Christy's hands were up, his eyes wide as headlights. "Number I'm no coppa." "Dirty bastard," said Liam, as he pulled out a pistol of his own, a small silver revolver. Mitchell pointed at his son's gun. "Finn, you're doing the honors." Liam held out the revolver. "Do this, and you're one of us, for true." Sean took the revolver, which was heavier than he anticipated. It sat in his palm, the same size as his hand. The bullet's golden casings stuck out from the chambers. One sat by the pin, anticipating the spark that would explode Sean, free from the maze that had become his life. He just didn't know where to aim it. At Michiel or Christy. "Who owns this pasture?" Sean heard himself say. "Don't worry," said Michelle. "I know the farmer. The land is only ever used for grazing. The hole's deep, and they don't crop here. The soil will never be disturbed. No one will find him." Sean took a moment, hearing the screech of a plane's engine as it readied for takeoff. Then he aimed the gun at Christy. "On your knees." Christy took a step back. "You can't be serious." "God damn it, get on your knees." Christy began to bend. "Turn around," said Sean, not wanting to see his face. "Turn around and get on your knees." Christy's eyes were darting around as if trying to find some sense in the world. He turned and got on his knees. "Please," he began. "Please, please, please, Jesus Christ. Please, God, please." Sean stepped behind Christy and held the gun to his head. Off in the distance, a plane began its long ascent into the clouds above. "Please," mumbled Christy. "Sean, please." Sean leant down, kissed Christy on the cheek, and whispered in his ear, "My name is Finn. The Last Supper. Surprise party. Murder. Mystery. This is a complete satire, not intended to mock religion. I meant to enter this in. Write about a gallery whose paintings come alive at night. Oops." On the evening of April 6th, 30 AD, chaos ensued during an impromptu farewell dinner party. A hidden underground chamber hosted a jubilant soiree beneath the renowned Louvre Museum. The celebratory evening took a sinister turn as it transformed into a horrifying murder scene. The guests, driven by an overwhelming desire to uncover the culprit among them, were determined to solve the mysterious crime. The night began when the Louvre Gallery's lights faded to black. Mr. Dali flipped the sign on the door, reading closed. Greeting him as he stepped outside was a stunning display of swirling hues: cobalt blue, incandescent yellow, and verdant green intermingled in the starry sky, resembling confetti. The stars twinkled like a celestial choir, harmonizing with his melodic whistle. Their mystical light illuminated the sky. He followed the otherworldly glow as it led him back home. Unease settled over him as he walked. He suspected he might have left the doors unlocked or the lights on. Behind the museum's closed doors, 3 distorted clocks with persistent memories chimed 7 or 8 times, sounding garbled. The hands of the clock, resembling molten lava, melted across the front desk. The time dissolved and spread across the ornate chairs and marble floor. Across the way, bustling activity filled the refectory of Monastero di San Lorenzo. The atmosphere was a mix of intense excitement and underlying unease, capturing the poignant moment. Fragrant scents of yeast, toasted grains, melted butter, roasted meats, and aromatic herbs wafted through the air, tantalizing and mouth-watering. Shouting in the grand chamber, Andrew exclaimed, "Almost 8!" He fidgeted, holding a torch, and lit the remaining candles on the grand table. "This useless lighter won't work," he exclaimed, slamming it down on the table in frustration. Moonlight streamed through the windows, casting a radiant glow on the refectory. The flickering candles created a serene ambiance despite the commotion in the chamber. "To hell with it all," Peter mutters. He opens a bottle of Chianti and starts guzzling it from the lip of the wicker vessel, feeling annoyed. With red-stained lips, Peter exclaims, "This is an absolute catastrophe." John and Philip emerged from the kitchen, coughing and struggling to breathe, while a cloud of smoke engulfed them. The room fell silent. "We still have bread," John says, cowering behind Philip, hoping nothing was flying at his head through the air. A ruckus ensued. Bartholomew stomped his foot. "You need to pull yourself together. Guests will arrive at any moment. This night is supposed to be a celebration. Quit fighting like gladiators in the Monera." Thomas and Matthew rushed to the door as the bell chimed to greet their first guest. "Welcome, Mona. It brings me great joy to have you," Thomas said. escorting the introspective and ethereal figure through the door. With an enigmatic smile, hinting at hidden secrets and unspoken feelings, Mona thanked her hosts for the kind invitation. After Mona, guests flooded through the door. Peter appreciated the guests' punctuality because the guest of honor was due to appear soon. The young ladies of Avignon huddled in a corner. Nadira Mbali embodied the fierce spirit of independence by wearing splendid tribal patterns inspired by Africa. Her clothing celebrated her heritage. Isabella Ramos's distinct and striking features drew Nadira into deep conversations. They explored the complexities of womanhood and society's limiting expectations. Isabella's words were sharp and precise, dissecting human emotions with a scalpel. She challenged societal norms and conventions. Sofia Calderon's avant-garde cubist aesthetic captivated guests. Her fragmented and distorted forms shattered conventional ideas of representation. The quirky style invited viewers to critically examine their perceptions of reality, immersing them in an intriguing and thought-provoking experience. Ava Serrano radiated confidence and sensuality. Her unapologetic sexuality defied societal expectations of modesty and control. Ava fearlessly moved her body across the chambers like a dancer. She hobnobbed with guests while challenging preconceived notions of femininity and inviting them to confront their inhibitions. Carmen Reyes emerged while concealing her face with a mask. Her fearless advocacy for women's rights and empowerment was her prime topic of discussion. Against patriarchy, she wielded her words as weapons, her voice as sharp as her wit. In each debate, she advocated for gender equality. Carmen's unwavering commitment to justice and the refusal of silence symbolized strength and resilience. With a mesmerizing display of ethereal beauty, Venus, the goddess of love, revealed her presence. Her allure transcended the limitations of the mortal realm. The enchanting depths of her ocean blue eyes mirrored the boundless compassion and understanding that resided within her soul. As she mingled, she commanded attention with her statuesque figure, which exuded sensuality and strength. A charismatic and enigmatic lad, Adam flirted with Venus by boasting about his creation. The confidence in the mastery of his anatomy and intricate details evoked awe and inspiration in Venus. Adam's charm was undeniable, with piercing blue eyes that held untold stories. He witnessed her captivating charm and inner radiance, which mesmerized him. She offered solace and ignited the flames of passion within his heart. Venus was captivated by his brilliant mind, filled with insatiable curiosity and a humble demeanor. Isabella Fontaine was a ravishing and imaginative woman. Her demeanor enchanted Alessandro Fiore. They bonded over their shared passion for art. As they embraced, their love and desire for each other became apparent with every gentle stroke of her hair. Their passion reflected the love that burns within their hearts, and their souls became forever entwined in the kiss, heard worldwide. The guests surrounded a group of dogs dressed in human clothing, playing poker around a table. The dogs were all engaged in the game when a raven flew to the skylight, warning the guests that their guest of honor was nearing. Peter gathered the guests in the middle of the chamber, and as the doors opened, everyone yelled, "Surprise! Jesus!" Jesus paused, blushing with shock. He relished the moment, his kind eyes reflecting his deep compassion for everyone present. His serene and benevolent face radiated a sense of divine wisdom and love. Long flowing hair and a well-groomed beard complemented his appearance. He moved across the marble floors elegantly, showcasing his spiritual authority and transcendence, while wearing a modest billowing garment extending to the ground. After removing the plum cloak draped over his shoulders, he adjusted the sash around his waist. Everyone present was crowded around Jesus, eager to touch the hem of his garment or bask in his presence. When he spoke, he filled the room with awe and reverence. His words carried a weight of profound wisdom and grace. His eyes sparkled with kindness, drawing everyone in. The atmosphere shifted as a sense of peace and hope enveloped the room. Peter gathered the guests around the table, rallying them to make a toast. He held up his goblet and said, "To the man who brings light and love wherever he goes, may he bless all with his presence on the road that he ventures forth on. The Louvre will miss you, Jesus." To everyone's dismay, John and Philip stood and announced that their dinner had gone awry. They'd only be serving bread and butter. James the younger ran around filling everyone's glasses with wine to ease the tension caused by the unexpected change in dinner plans. Eliza Hawthorne stood out among the guests with serene strength and unwavering determination. Her piercing eyes, reminiscent of the golden hues of an autumn sky, mirrored her inner fortitude. Her hair, arranged in a bun, complemented her firm lips. They exuded an air of stoicism and resolve that belied her delicate features. In his convictions, Henry stayed steadfast with a few words. He gazed at the crowd with eyes resembling the roots of an ancient oak tree that shaded their farmhouse. He silently stood beside Eliza as she extended her invitation with effortless grace. She declares, "We propose to share the bounty of our garden, inviting everyone to partake in the fresh vegetables outside in our cart." With his broad shoulders and hands roughened by years of manual labor, Henry showcases his physical prowess. They embodied rugged masculinity and muted strength as he reached for a piece of bread. Eliza's hands, calloused from years of hard work on the family farm, coaxing life from the fertile soil, handed him the warm butter. Laughter and chatter filled the room. Everyone enjoyed the simple meal and each other's company. Wine flowed with the harmonious chatter, celebrating Jesus. Amelia Munch interrupted the chatter by wailing a piercing scream, which reverberated through the refectory like shattering glass. Fear and existential angst etched anxiety across her porcelain skin. Her haunting beauty and piercing green eyes conveyed a profound sense of terror. Everyone gathered around curiously to see a nude woman lying on a couch covered in blood. Judas Iscariot declares that someone among them is the menaced assassin. The group exchanges nervous glances, unsure of whom to trust. Suspicions grow, causing the once warm and inviting atmosphere to turn cold and tense. Iscariot's accusation lingers, casting a shadow over the joyous gathering. With unwavering resolve and dignity, Margaret Whittaker started whistling an eerie tune as she rocked in her chair. Despite facing hardships, she exuded tranquility and grace. Her silver hair was pulled back tight in a bun, and her hands were folded in her lap. Though tired and worn from years of worry, Margaret's eyes sparkled with muted intelligence, as if she knew something. Her calm demeanor drew others to her, commanding their attention. As the evening wore on, whispers of suspicion and curiosity circulated among the guests. Margaret's enigmatic presence had drawn them all in, and unease settled over the room as they awaited her next move. Amelia Monk wailed a piercing scream out of nowhere again. The scream reverberated through the refectory like shattering glass. Fear etched her porcelain skin with anxiety and existential angst. Her haunting beauty and piercing green eyes again convey a profound sense of terror. With a sense of exacerbation, Mona Lisa wonders, what is it now? Her face changes, adorned with a tapestry of emotions that flows with each fleeting moment. captivating all who dared to bask in her presence. Mona Lisa possesses the uncanny ability to cloak her thoughts and feelings in an aura of mystery. Intrigued, all the guests surround her. "The girl with the pearl earring only wears one," stuttered Emila Munch. "Behold, it is right there," she said, pointing to the lifeless woman. Underneath her body, a pearl sparkled, unraveling a clue. Munch's discovery challenged the guests to confront their wildest fears. Emilia epitomized the situation with anxiety and the human condition. She reminded everyone of their shared vulnerabilities in the situation. The need for camaraderie and understanding in this tragic moment was undeniable, urging immediate action. The girl with the pearl earring reached up to cover her bare ear. Her delft was sublime and mysterious. The girl's modest, dark-colored gown and her long chestnut hair exuded strength and resilience. But her piercing blue eyes divulged her guilt, unveiling her hidden desire and rebellion against societal expectations. "Show us your matching earrings," said the bulldog, wearing a top hat and a monocle. A terrier in a tuxedo, a dachshund in a sweater vest, and a golden retriever in a baseball cap chimed in. "Where is your missing trinket, yeah?" They quipped and resumed the game of poker to bet on whodunit. Admitting her guilt, Emilia, the intelligent and keen girl with the opal accessory, takes responsibility. She knew escaping this blunder would be impossible. Her eyes reflect the depth of her inner turmoil and dreams. "Envy clouded my vision, distorting my perception of reality," she cried. At a nearby diner, a police officer was consoling a young boy who had run away from home. Out of nowhere, his walkie-talkie crackled to life, notifying him of a homicide in progress. The officer rushed to the scene, apprehending the girl with the missing pearl earring believed to be involved in the murder. The situation's urgency demanded swift action, and the officer quickly secured the suspect. Jesus blessed her as she repented of her sins and was hauled off to Artemisia Gentileschi prison for high-risk female offenders in Surrey. His compassion grew as he saw the remorse in her eyes, knowing she was just a victim of circumstances. As she left in handcuffs, he committed to visiting her and helping her turn her life around. Emilia looked back at the kind-hearted man, with tears streaming down her face, grateful for his compassion during her darkest moment. She vowed to make amends for her past mistakes and to strive for a better future. With a determined spirit, Jesus watched the girl with the pearl earring disappear out the door, vowing to guide her toward redemption. The scene touched the police officer's heart, sparking a glimmer of hope in his chest. Perhaps the girl's story will have a different ending with the Savior by her side. A sense of unease lingered in Mr. Dolly's mind as he rattled his keys in the museum's front door. He meticulously inspected the premises, ensuring every door was locked and the lights were extinguished. When the last switch flipped, a surprise gasp reverberated through the room. The startled guests scampered, their footsteps echoing in the deserted halls. The horseman. The man on the horse was an odd one. I could tell that even as he angled his quarter horse into my beams like it was his turn in the center ring. An Easterner, which maybe 10 years earlier might have seemed even odder. Little dressier than the average rancher, handled his animal like he knew how, but had learned it someplace else. "Saw you from the rise," the man said. Easterner, all right. Kind of horse-faced fellow with a government haircut and a big nose that reminded me of the Jew families that had passed through the dust and winds in Pop's tourist camp on their way to California. Not that I gave a damn. Pop hadn't given a shit about God after he took Ma in 32, and so he likewise didn't give two shits about anybody's private dealings with the Lord with or without Jesus. No, it was the man's eyes. Big, calm, curious. "Do you need some assistance?" My old Nash 400 was running like a top on 4 threadbare but plump tires, and the trunk was flung open with the jack still clamped into place. And then there was the Indian blanket I'd got in trade for some janitor work at the last gas before the next last gas on the way to my pot of gold that had turned into a cesspool about 2 hours ago. Oh, and the shovel lying next to the blanket rolled tight like a Tulsa oil man's stogie on the dirt under the lip of the trunk. Even without Jesus putting his 2 cents in, it wasn't the way I'd been raised. But like I said, it was the eyes, unblinking even in my headlamps, and that slow smile he gave me as I pulled Pop's old Colt out of my belt and made him a third eye, like I'd done him the biggest favor in the world. I'd settled in Espanola a couple years after the Depression ended, though, or maybe cause I'd helped the town undertaker put a number of such folks under the shifting Oklahoma topsoil for a few pennies a body, I'd sought out someplace a little more off the path of men, desperate or stupidly hopeful enough to drag their wives and young ones through the valley of death to a pot of gold that didn't exist. But everything shrinks as we grow, my pop once said, and it wasn't too long until they started to trickle south off the California Trail into the desert. College types, engineers, they said, Easterners, Jews, I heard, and more than a few foreigners who weren't fooling anybody with names like Henry Farmer and Nicholas Baker. Now, I'd never been out of Oklahoma before Pop's lungs finally gave out, and I dug one last grave this time for free, and I'd sure as shootin' never met any Germans. As at the time we had an axe to grind with Mr. Hitler, I was a sight more than nervous about the funny voices with the funny names sidling up beside me at the local watering hole on a Saturday night. Didn't help that the government had bought out the ranch school and put me out of the first steady work I'd had since sorting the dead from Pop's barely paying guests. The school and its high-flown Eastern teachers and rich folks' kids playing cowboy seemed a bit silly to me, but groundskeeper's pay was decent, and the Ponzes treated me right. Felt no desire to stick around afterwards, even with the new jobs the government and their engineers were bringing to the area. What the Easterners and foreigners specifically were doing may have been the best-kept secret in the Southwest, but the tighter you keep the lid on the pot, the bigger the mess when things boil over. All anybody could guess was it had to something to do with that aforementioned scrap with Der Fuhrer, but folks got rattled with the army and the federal suits, cleverly watching every move the locals made. Bad enough, they were keeping Nazi prisoners and Japanese folks from California on ice down south at Fort Stanton. Seemed passing strange we weren't rounding up Germans and Italians who could blend right in at any military base or shipyard, but my 2 cents wasn't going to buy me anything but trouble, especially these days. The Denver and Rio Grande Western had ripped out the Chile line and pulled the tracks from Espanola in '42, but the town was hanging on between the nearby farms and the new government jobs 10 miles to the west. I was a handy sort with nowhere really to go, so I hung on too, in what passed for the middle of nowhere. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I think that's in the Old Testament, or maybe some tourist dropped that pearl on me on their way to the new promised land. As I now headed the opposite direction, back through Espanola and north past Taos into the mountains near the Colorado border, I could feel God's jeering presence. Poor time to get religion, with 2 bodies stuffed in the trunk and a ticket to hell waiting at the station for me. When I think about it, and believe you me, I have, maybe that's precisely the time. I put them deep in the Carson forest. It was a skill I thought I'd put behind me. But even the dead can surprise you. I was in my bed a few hours before dawn, contemplating and shivering on the bare mattress. It was sheep country. I could get a new blanket in the morning, though at this moment I wasn't sure of the need. Barring rattlers, The horse was the only one got off free that night. Hitler willingly gave up his ghost in the spring of '45, and his pal Mussolini got a date with a firing squad and a public showing strung up like the day's catch outside a Milan filling station. It took close to 3 more years to rein in Hirohito. After destroying the Japanese Navy and taking a string of Pacific islands, hemming the empire in nice and neat, we rained fire down on Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, and Fukuyama. I say we, although I spent most of my stint with the 124th Transportation Battalion in Luzon, up to my elbows in axle grease and sweat. I'd signed up 2 months after that night in the forest, reasoning only more blood would wash away what was on my hands and my soul. I was pretty much nobody in the middle of nowhere, and when no GIs or Eastern-looking fellows in suits and badges showed up on what passed for my doorsteps, I figured Uncle Sam had chalked things up to Nazi spies, or an unlucky turn on a dark plateau trail, or maybe Junior, as I'd come to call him, just bugging out. It was those goddamned eyes. He seemed like a man looking for a back door out of purgatory. Wonder if the sergeant at the Santa Fe recruiting office spotted anything like that in my bloodshot brown eyes. See, thing with being nobody, having nobody in the middle of nowhere is the company you're forced to keep. Nobody was ever likely to find the bodies, and nobody was likely ever going to spill a tear over the man who'd soiled my good blanket. But every time I listened to the bodies piling up on the radio, I wondered how many others I'd buried. Just what was it that midnight horseman had been up to at the old ranch school, with his army of eggheads with phony names and their army keeping the whole town under wraps? And why did most of the lot just pull up stakes a few weeks after? Had to be some kind of secret weapon, blow the Krauts and the Japs off the map, my guess? For one bleary moment, I thought my brain had contracted TB and an Irish brogue, but it was one of the Denver and Rio Grande Western's Gandy dancers who'd lost a knee and his toes and the works in between to a 3 p.m. coal car maybe 15 years ago. It hadn't broke him of the whiskey. He read too many of those cheap detective magazines with the gumshoes and masked crusaders and flying saucers and half-naked women about to be sawed up, or worse, and I'd had my wits about me. I'd have heard him creaking down the planks and cleared my stool. "And what makes you think that?" I asked, 'cause it was the noise I needed. "My sister's boy. He does some plumbing and odd jobs for them mad scientists down the road." The old man wheezed. "Seems like everybody's in an uproar over the boss fella gone missing a few weeks back. Seem to think there's spies all about, Nazis or commies or some such. Young Danny happened down the wrong hall, and the soldier boys there grilled him near to medium well." "Boss?" My voice went up a couple notches, but he was too stewed to notice. "Some Jew scientist from California supposed to be grand muckamuck of the whole operation. Jingleheimer, Weisenheimer, something like that. Some of the talk is, this Jew might be the spy." He leaned in on the half-leg and grabbed my sleeve as a thick cloud of coffin varnish sent me reeling back. "Now, you think about it, boyo. Why you think every man-jack's knickers are in such a knot, lest something big was in the works? You ever hear of atoms? You know, the stuff what we're all of us made of? Well, I hear tell Hitler and his boys have found a way to split them atoms, to just rip all of creation apart. Unless we get there first and blow the fella to hell first, little wonder them Nazis would want to rub out Dr. Jingleheimer." He then toppled from his stool. I caught him halfway to the floor, jostled him back into place, and made for the door. Crisp desert night outside, the moon too close and stars scattered across the black, nothing like atoms torn asunder. I jumped in the Nash, somehow made it alive back to my shack, and packed for my penance. Recently leaked revelations allege the U.S. Defense and State Departments largely falsified published reports that Nazi Germany and Russia were on the verge of harnessing atomic fission as a potential weapon against America and its European allies, purportedly to spur Allied physicists to escalate development of such an atomic bomb to bring about a speedier surrender by Hitler's forces. That effort, referred to as the Manhattan Project, was conducted under a nearly impenetrable cloak of military security on the site of a former boys' academy near Los Alamos, under the auspices of preeminent theoretical physician J. Robert Oppenheimer. Without revealing the nature of his work, Oppenheimer's mysterious disappearance late one night in 1944 sparked a massive manhunt, and rumors the eccentric scientist had collaborated either with the Germans or the Russians, given his wife and brother's ties to the American Communist Party. The case remains open to this day, and the Manhattan Project ended shortly after Adolf Hitler's suicide and the effective fall of his Nazi regime. Amid the loss of one of its most brilliant minds and fears of further security breaches, the remaining physicists of Los Alamos declared the project a failure. Or so we thought. I talked this week with Isidore Isaac Rabi and David L. Hill, former Manhattan Project researcher. In a 60 Minutes exclusive, Rabi and Hill reveal for the first time that they and other project scientists concerned about the long-range implications of atomic warfare conspired to conceal their findings from the military. Rabi, Dr. Oppenheimer himself voiced doubts about the sanity of releasing such a force into the world, but he was under intense pressure to beat Hitler, beat Stalin to the punch. None of us knew we alone held the keys to a Pandora's box, but without Robert's zeal, we reached a hard but crucial decision. There are questions which illuminate, and there are those that destroy. I was always taught to ask the first kind. The only answer to the question of the day was destruction. If not merely the instantaneous vaporization of entire cities and the then unquantified after effects of ambient radiation, then the geopolitical stranglehold and atomic arms race between the US, Russia, perhaps even the former People's Republic of China would impose upon the human race. And imagine if such a weapon were deployed. There would be no defense, no deterrence, only annihilation. Rabi was awarded the 1944 Nobel Prize for his discovery of nuclear magnetic resonance, a major breakthrough in medical imaging and diagnosis, and his work in microwave technology revolutionized military and commercial radar systems and led to the introduction of the home microwave oven in the mid-1950s. Meanwhile, following the dissolution of the Manhattan Project, project team member David Hill headed up the Federation of American Scientists, later to become the Global Federation of Responsible Scientists, with the overthrow of Joseph Stalin and subsequent collapse of communism across Russia, Eastern Europe, and Northern China. Under Hill's leadership, the Federation worked with the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and other international agencies to design virtually fail-safe atomic reactors, which have all but replaced coal-fired power facilities and have been credited with greatly reducing air pollution around the planet. We reached Dr. Hill at his Santa Fe home. Hill continues to defend Oppenheimer's patriotism and loyalty, as he has since President Truman branded the missing physicist a traitor in league with communist factions. Hill. The consensus was that the specter of atomic warfare and destruction would come to eclipse any prospect of science in the public interest. We've harnessed the power of the atom to save lives and provide clean, safe energy. I posit we'd never have put men and women on Mars, nor developed a seamless worldwide web of satellite communications and technology had we created a world occupied solely with averting global apocalypse. Wallace. Not everyone concurs with your assessment. Retired Major General Boris Pash, who headed up the investigation into Oppenheimer's disappearance in 1944, argues you and your colleagues withheld vital scientific information that might have ended the war 4 to 5 years earlier, saving, in his words, countless American and civilian Japanese lives. And to this day, Posh believes Oppenheimer was complicit either in your deception or acts of espionage. He's pushing the Justice Department to bring formal charges against what he called the Manhattan conspirators. Your response? Hill. Mr. Wallace, I'd invite you to imagine a football stadium filled to the rafters with all those American, British, Australian, Russian, Japanese casualties. Then imagine dropping a bomb that would wipe out an area 5, 10, 100 miles around that stadium. Then look ahead at the radioactive wastes that would linger in the air above that area for months, possibly years, that might carry across 100, possibly thousands of miles. Multiply that by as many bombs as it might take to prove we mean business. As for Dr. Oppenheimer, you have to understand the exhaustion and stress we were all under. Robert's way of dealing with that pressure, his doubts about the work and its consequences, was to ride the mountain trails around Los Alamos, through the Sangre de Cristo and the Jemez mountain ranges. He loved New Mexico, and he loved his horses. We were on the verge of a key breakthrough at that point, and he vanished shortly after supper. Most of us knew where he'd probably gone, and when they found his horse wandering around the plateau about 3 miles off, we figured he'd met up with some kind of misadventure. Dr. Oppenheimer would never have let that animal to languish in the wilds. That was something General Groves and his men would never understand. It was a small item on the Sunday news feed, but the Tao's byline had caught my eye. A massive flash flood had uncovered, and a trio of hikers had discovered what looked to be the skeletal remains of 2 adult males, one wrapped in the shreds of a decomposed wool blanket. A couple ribs shattered by one bullet, another bullet found rattling around in his companion's punctured skull. They'll surprise you, all right. And with them, the rest comes surging back. The soldiers, the flyers, the privates and colonels and generals, the moms and dads and sons and daughters caught in the Spitfire, the moms and dads and sons and daughters snared in limbo, merely for being the face of the enemy, or a fair enough approximation. The odd horseman with the tortured eyes who'd suffered such indignity and injustice for taking a midnight ride. I'd taken a single souvenir that night in the forest, secreted it away to the Pacific on the second great California migration to find that golden pot in the airplane plants and the aeronautics trade, tucked it in a bedroom drawer through a marriage, 2 sons, a funeral, and 2 graduations, buried it deep packing for that one final job far, but not far enough away. Now, it seemed, was the time. It had been a tough week in the field, and I'd hoped to catch the satellite feed of 60 Minutes and maybe Columbo, but this finally seemed the time. I set the yellowing badge, number 76, I guessed how the brass kept track of their college boys, on top of the TV monitor, trying not to look in those damnably damned eyes this time. Bye, JR. Then I wrote this for you, whoever you wind up being. You can see the right people get it. Then I think I'll step out for a bit of air. The desert is beautiful at night, especially in the high beams of a double moon. The boy with frozen wings. You have my attention, says the grand assassin. Who? He. The boy drops his gaze to the Varos gold coin on the tavern's backroom table, his guarantee of safe audience, then looks back up at the man. The grand assassin's wrinkles and white hair may or may not be real, but the eyes are. pinprick pupils caught in still water stare back at the boy. I can't say it. Have you heard the story of the little bird with the frozen wings? The grand assassin asks. Are there two birds and a stone in it? No, lad. It's the one about the bird flying south for the winter. The air is so cold that his wings turn to ice and he falls into a meadow. Do you know what happens to this bird? The boy shakes his head, platinum hair peeking out despite his hood's concealing efforts. A cow comes by and drops some dung on the frozen bird, and in this steaming pile of crap, the bird's wings begin to thaw. He's ready to fly again, but now he's stuck. So, he chirps for help. The boy watches the grand assassin's bare hand hover over the Varos coin as the man whistles a plaintive tune that ends in a soft squawk. Finally, a passing cat hears the bird's cry and comes over to investigate. It digs the bird free, cleans him in the grass, and eats him. What does it mean? Asks the boy, willing the grand assassin to touch the gold coin. First, not everyone who shits on you is your enemy. Second, if you're in deep shit, it's best to keep your mouth shut. But most importantly, it means that not everyone who gets you out of shit is your friend. So do you want my help? Yes. The boy throws off his hood and says the name of the crown prince. The grand assassin's hand drops under the weight of that name. His fingers touch the Varos coin on the table, and some reptilian part of his mind notes that the coin is slick, oily even. But his higher consciousness is focused on the face before him. He is staring at the crown prince's exact likeness. Yes, I'm his decoy. The boy pauses, hoping the man will fill in the rest. But I don't have to be. The grand assassin sucks in his breath once he realizes the lookalike's audacity. Steal the life of the crown prince, then slip in to take his place. Can he do it? How will you explain his missing decoy then? Fire, the boy says matter-of-factly. The man opens his mouth, then closes it again. He's used to watching men squirm in the wake of what's left unsaid, but this boy makes him feel like the talkative one. He watches the boy for any sign of uncertainty, but all he gets in return is a polite blank stare. Finally, he slides the coin of Varos into his leather purse. As an afterthought, he wipes his oily fingers on his jerkin. Then, the boy tells him when and where. Their audience concluded, the boy pulls up his hood and leaves the tavern's back room. He weaves through day drunks, then through the city Azamal's maze of alleyways. He stops at a bustling marketplace and takes in his surroundings. He doesn't think the grand assassin has changed his mind and decided to follow now that their safe audience is over. No, the man thinks himself a cat poised above the future king. Still, a diversion wouldn't hurt. He listens to the different voices, then joins the crowd. There's a pretty lass, he says in a baritone voice, and pinches a fishwife's arse on his way past. The fishwife accosts a nearby man who's speaking in that same baritone voice to his friends. The man stumbles against a cloth merchant's stall. "Thief! Stop, thief!" the boy cries in the bewildered shopkeeper's own voice. Then, he nabs a new cloak to throw over his own as he melts away into the pandemonium. Along the way, he tears off the tainted gloves that he used to touch the Varos coin. Back in the castle confines, the boy is in another back room of sorts, a half-remembered guard tower. There's nothing to guard here because this edge of the castle wall ends on a cliff, a chasm forged centuries ago when the gods threw Varos down from on high. The inside is lined with scrolls and manuscripts bound between boards. This is the record keeper's domain. The record keeper lost his tongue for some long ago unspoken crime. From the way the man walks, the boy knows that was not all that has been cut from him. The crown prince never comes here because he is a cow whose bovine brow cannot bear the burden of reading. But the boy loves the record keeper. He is his greatest friend, his greatest teacher, the one who showed him the scrolls on poisons long forgotten. At first, the boy thought poison alone would be his answer, but the best one, Oria's kiss, takes time to act. There would be no guarantee he'd be positioned to take the crown prince's place unnoticed once the kiss called him home. Silent but ever listening, the record keeper had shown the boy a manuscript on Varos and his assassin cult. Yes, the coin, the grand assassin, it's all coming together, but there's still time to talk yet. The boy and the record keeper have their own way of speaking. The boy blasts through his repertoire of voices while pausing to listen to the tongueless man's eyes. They sit now facing each other with an imaginary coin in between them. Have you heard the story of the little bird with the frozen wings? The boy asks in a perfect imitation of the grand assassin. The record keeper's eyes brim over with pride, with adoration for the protege who gives him voice. Late in the night, he will bar the servants' quarters and start a fire. There will always be more servants, and no one will count bones to make sure the crown prince's decoy is among the last lot. For now, he watches as the boy climbs the crumbling guard tower, then jumps to the nearby hemlock tree. The boy balances on the end of a branch, then he's over the castle wall. The record keeper says a silent prayer that the boy will return riding the crown prince's horse. Deep within the hardwood forest, the boy waits at the appointed spot. He cannot see the grand assassin, but he can hear horses in the distance. The crown prince is fox hunting with his retinue and outing among sycophants. The boy shouts out a fox's warning call, a vixen's scream to draw the dogs. He throws his voice and steps behind a tree as the foxhounds bumble past him. The crown prince, whose horse is by far the fastest and whose friends dare not outpace him, is close behind with no other riders in sight. Something detaches itself from the undergrowth, and the crown prince falls from his saddle. He has time to low once in pain before the thing is on him. The now never king jerks, once then falls silent. The grand assassin is caked in mud. Only his still-water eyes are recognizable. They watch as the boy pulls off the crown prince's pinky ring. A knife touches the boy's throat. The grand assassin is saying something, but his words are cut short by the sound of approaching hooves. The knife vanishes. So does the crown prince's body, as the grand assassin pulls his prey into the undergrowth. With feline grace, the boy hops onto the crown prince's horse and turns to meet his retinue. Later that night, as fire burns away the memory of the decoy, the grand assassin will stare at the night sky. The stars will shimmer and merge into one bright light as the numbness in his fingertips creeps up his arm and seeps into his heart. That will be Oria's kiss, courtesy of Varos's coin, calling him home. The grand assassin won't curse the new crown prince, the future king, who would have owed him everything. No, he'll be too busy staring at the sky and trying to take flight. As for his words cut short in the woods, the new crown prince remembers them perfectly. Remember this moment, and you will. And what will the boy of many voices with only the tongueless to know his secret do? Well, some things are better left unsaid.